Hello everybody and welcome to Barino's Bodybuilding and Fitness. I'm your host Joe Barino. Welcome to my new YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching, where we discuss everything bodybuilding and fitness. Today, for my very first video, I want to talk about how bodybuilding is doing a complete 360 and going back to its roots. I'm only going to talk about as far as competitive bodybuilding, so let's start from the beginning, the Mr. Olympia. From the years 1965 to about 1992, the Olympia and bodybuilding competitions were judged under this criteria: symmetry, proportion, size, clarity of muscle, and posing. How can you display your physique? How can you show it off? And of course, we have seen some of the greatest physiques to ever exist. We'll go all the way back from Larry Scott, who was the very first Mr. Olympia, to Sergio Oliva, to Arnold Schwarzenegger, Franco, the list goes on. Now, the only difference between the 60s and the 70s, once we got to the 80s, the bodybuilders, yes, they got bigger, clearly, but they were still aesthetic. They were shredded. The posing was such a beautiful art form. You look at posers like Samir, you look at Bob Paris, you look at a bodybuilder like Tom Platz, who, gosh, his legs I still think are the greatest of all time. The way these guys showed their physiques, incredible, and how they looked. The physiques were so very appealing. Now, here's where bodybuilding took a shift. 1993. At this point, Dorian Yates won his very first Olympia in 92. 93, you can clearly see a shift and a difference. Dorian just was huge and ripped. He looked like a piece of granite. He was solid. He was thick. Now, he might not have been as aesthetic as competitors like Kevin Levrone, who I believe came in second that year, but that was the start of the shift. He won unanimously. Everybody agreed Dorian was the winner. But going on past 93, Dorian beat the likes of, like I said, Kevin Levrone, Flex Wheeler, Sean Ray, all of whose physiques looked aesthetically pleasing. But at this point, Dorian just became so huge, so big, while still being shredded, that he kept winning. I remember, I think it was the 94 Olympia, either 94 or 95, when it was him and Sean Ray, and he had the torn bicep. Now, judging from the pictures, I really think Sean Ray should have won. Sean Ray was one of the last bodybuilders to still be rocking a vacuum, and Dorian beat him, which is starting to signify there's a change. Suddenly, we're not looking at aesthetics. Suddenly, we're just looking at mass. How big can you get? But then, Dorian competed in his last Olympia because injuries caught up with him. Ronnie Coleman took the crown for the next 8 years. Now, in Ronnie Coleman's first two Olympias, he had an incredibly aesthetic physique. I think even up to the year 2000 until like 2001, 2002, I'd argue his physique was still aesthetic. But here's the final nail in the coffin: the 2001 Mr. Olympia. In the 2001 Mr. Olympia, it came down to two people, Jay Cutler and Ronnie Coleman. Ronnie Coleman, of course, huge and shredded, looked phenomenal, but he was a little bloated in his midsection. It wasn't as bad, as what would follow, but the bloatingness started to show. Jay Cutler, shredded, ripped. His abs looked phenomenal. He looked so aesthetically pleasing. Of course, when it came to the back shots, nobody can beat Coleman in the back. But you can even see, if you look up footage from that contest, Coleman was worried that he would lose, because I think even he knew that Jay Cutler looks better than him. But of course, as we all know, Ronnie Coleman won because he was just bigger, thus finally solidifying it is no longer about aesthetics, no longer about how good you look. It's how big can you be? How big and shredded can you be? And how well can you pull that package off? And Coleman did until 2005. Now, there hasn't been that big a shift since then. Since then, it's just been big and shredded. I mean, Jay Cutler's '09 physique, he looked phenomenal. Oh my gosh, so good. One of the greatest physiques to ever grace an Olympia stage. You look at Phil Heath, too, one of the greatest physiques ever. But you start to look at the problems. And the midsections were becoming a problem. Bodybuilders couldn't control it. Suddenly, posing was getting sloppy. They were out of breath. They didn't look as graceful as they did in the 1970s and 80s. We lost the art. We lost the art form of bodybuilding. It just became a bunch of monsters on stage. And yes, it's entertaining because they're huge, but we lost that grace. We lost that aesthetic. And the bodybuilding fans voiced their opinion. They said, we miss this. We need this. That's why then, they had some of these other categories like, what is it? Physique, Olympia. Gosh, there's so many different categories now. I don't know why I'm blanking on them. But they would introduce these subcategories because people missed the aesthetics. But finally, they released a classic physique division in which Danny Hessler, I believe, was the very first winner that judged on symmetry, size, proportion, and posing. So finally, that's the start of the shift. But still, if you look at the men's open, they were still huge, the distended guts. I believe it was the 2018 Olympia when Phil Heath lost. He couldn't control his gut. He had the hernia, and I love Phil Heath. He's such a great person, a good bodybuilder, but he couldn't control it. And Sean Roden won, who looked phenomenal. But suddenly, behind the Mr. Olympia, you see classic physique still poking up there. Now let's flash forward to this current Olympia, 2022. As I film this video, February's next week. We're well over a month removed. Who's the most popular bodybuilder on the planet? Hadi Choopan was the winner of the men's open, but it is not Hadi. It is Chris Bumstead. Look at Chris Bumstead's social media. He has exploded, getting no less than 1 million likes per post. Everybody's loving him. He's the next big thing because look at him. He looks flawless. Even with a torn bicep, he looked flawless. Now, I'm not knocking the men's openers because the men's open, they all looked great. Hadi was rocking a vacuum. I predicted Hadi would win. I should have put money on it. I predicted he was going to win well before. And the physiques we're finally getting to a point where we're going back. That's why I say when bodybuilding's doing a 360, we're going back to that aesthetic. Because even look at the men's open, not even just this year. I believe like 2020. I remember ever since Hadi came on the scene, he was rocking a vacuum. And I said, oh my gosh, we have a men's open who's doing a vacuum. When's the last time that happened? Must have been Sean Ray in the 90s. So to see that now makes me as a bodybuilding fan so happy. But now it's curious because I think classic physique arguably is a little more popular than men's open. Where's bodybuilding going to go? Who knows? But all I know is there's a shift. It's finally going back to its roots. So thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. This is my very first channel. I'll tell you quick, I'm just a big bodybuilding fan, love the sport, and I'm just really passionate about it. So that's why I'm starting this channel. I'm going to do videos at least once a week. I'm going to the Arnold Classic in March, so you know I'll be posting about that. Thank you all so much. I don't know any of you yet, but please comment. Let's converse. Let's engage. What are your thoughts on bodybuilding's current place and where it's currently heading? I would love to know. Let's talk. Let's engage. Thank you so much. God bless you all. That's all I got for Barrino's Bodybuilding and Fitness.